Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name is Suj.
And my name is James.
Fantasy Premier League. There's a game today.
There is.
Was it today? Thursday?
It is Thursday. Fulham v Chelsea tonight.
Is this the last game week though? This is game week 19.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which feels like it kicked off about a month ago, but yeah, it ends tonight. I'm not bothered about it. I got two players. Have I got two players? Yeah, I got Pereira and Kepa. You?
I don't know anything. Yeah, same. Pereira. I've got Pereira and Kepa.
All these cup games in the middle, you completely forget, don't you?
Yeah, it just I mean, today's episode, listeners, is all about chip talk. I find it
Be nice.
Turn off. Is that the right phrase to use?
This is where I try and help people.
Yeah, I get it, and it don't get me wrong, it's interesting, but I feel like I'm the type of manager. Maybe some will relate that plays with the cards he's dealt rather than tries to guess the cards he's going to be dealt. Do you know what I mean? So, and I also feel like any time that we try and excessively guess what's going to happen.
I'm not going to do that on this podcast.
No, I mean, sorry. You set your team up sometimes to maneuver certain situations, and people are very, and I'd say it's probably 50-50, although I'm happy for the listeners to say otherwise, where you shoot yourself in the foot by trying to forward plan, and then there's 50% of the cases where, like last season, when we had the double game weeks towards the end, there were some fucking monster scores, right? 150s, 160s. What game week was that? I feel like there was one game week where
the KDB
where 100 wasn't even very good. That kind of thing can also happen. But we are right in the thick of should I, shouldn't I? The only thing I think I found interesting is the increase in the last 2 or 3 days on Twitter, and it's not a sample size of most FPL players. I get it. Of talk that I've seen of people triple captaining this week. That's the only thing that's consciously in my mind. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it might not be better in the future. I'm just going to do it." But I haven't been inspired to do it myself yet.
We are one of the things we'll cover in this podcast is numerous different triple captaincy possibilities. That is, to be honest, the main reason why we are doing this now. Well, that and the potential for fixtures to be added possibly in game week 21 or 22. Commonly, we would do this podcast. It is very popular every year after the FA Cup 4th round, because then we really can kind of look into deep. Once we've got the FA Cup 5th round draw, we can say the probability of game week 28, the blank for the quarterfinals, will be this. We can look at that with probability, which now we could look at and go, oh, I think Tottenham will get to the FA Cup quarterfinals. Yeah, but if they get Man City or Arsenal away in the 5th round, that probability is going to change, right? So we'd normally do it after the 4th round, and we will do it again. But the reason for doing it now is a couple of reasons. One, like I said, there's fixtures that could get added new. It could get added today, possibly. We're going to go through a few little possibilities just to make you aware. I can't say this is going to happen, this isn't going to happen. What I can do is give you the possibilities and make you aware of them. And also, I felt it was important to do it more now because it dawned on me at the weekend, as it has for you over the last few days, that triple captaincy was going to become a big topic. And it's become an even bigger topic after Manchester City's defeat to Southampton in the Carabao Cup.
Yeah, I just noticed now. I didn't even look yesterday.
You didn't even know that City lost.
I literally opened it up and I thought, oh yeah, there was that. Was that yesterday? Yes, it was.
It was last night.
Ooh.
So, James,
2-0.
Why didn't we do the main podcast on Monday? This is why we're doing it today. Just in case something went out of sync in the cup.
These are all single legs. Last night was all one leg.
It's finished, done.
So that's it. City are out. Wolves are out. Charlton are out. Leicester are out. So it's Newcastle United, Southampton, Forest. Forest going to win a cup and be relegated in the same season. Go on.
Well, and Southampton can't.
Imagine.
So Manchester United fans are suddenly dreaming of quadruples.
So the semis are 2 legs, from what I can see.
They are, yes. Semi-finals are played in between game weeks 21 and 22. And the draw very much leads us to believe that the final will be Manchester United versus Newcastle United. United have drawn Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have said Southampton would have beaten City.
No, true.
But I think both clubs
over 2 legs, you do more
want to win a trophy as well. Like, Manchester United fans might feel, but a cup's a cup, right? And they haven't won much.
Well, United will be favourites with the bookies, and Newcastle obviously are desperate for a trophy. I mean, we've got a fantastic chance. Not only have United drawn Forest and Newcastle drawn Southampton in the draw, but they've both drawn them with the first leg away and the second leg at home. Stop this nonsense, mate. So we will know before game week 22
Saudi money.
which games will be off in game week 25. But the big news from the Carabao Cup ties, of course, is that City Bournemouth in 25 is now on. So the only way Manchester City have a double game week after the 2 we know, game week 20 and game week 23, is either themselves or West Ham get to the FA Cup quarter-final, or themselves or Brighton get to the FA Cup semi-final. That's the only way Manchester City can have a double game week beyond game week 23. Unless, of course, there's unforeseen circumstances like weather or COVID, or there's something else that I'm going to mention during this podcast that could even cause a blank in game week 35.
You want to mention it now?
I'll get onto it.
Okay.
Firstly, few people just want to give a shout out for those, many of you listen will be on Twitter. There were 4 must follow people as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure all of you have heard of Ben Crellin. Make sure you're following him. He's on the case in terms of spreadsheets, probabilities, everything. Does really nice visuals. Lego Mane FPL, it's Lego Mane _FPL is very worth a follow as well. What he does really nicely as well, shows nice spacing between game days, for example, with some really nice graphics. That's really handy when you're thinking, I want to triple captain this player. Oh shit, he's playing twice in 3 days, or he's got a gap of 5 days. He's got some really nice visuals on that, and he's a very clever person as well. Ian Parrin at Planet Sky primarily focuses on Sky Fantasy Football, but Ian is a genius and one of the most underfollowed people and underappreciated, in my opinion, on Twitter. Ian's skill set is to the extent that he can predict what game's going to be on a Monday night in March, for example. He is a very clever cookie. And Tala Nadeem, who's been on the podcast with us previously before as well, that's Tala _Nadeem _9090. Very clever mind as well, will engage with everybody on Twitter and have a conversation about probabilities for what fixtures can go where. There are other people as well, of course, but I think those 4 people are must follow on Twitter. Let's deal with the immediate first. So, in theory, every game that's previously been postponed because of, obviously, the Queen's sad passing from game week 7 and 8, in theory, every game can go into game week 21. Except for, obviously, ties that would feature the 4 teams who are in the Carabao Cup semi-finals. Between game week 21 and 22, you've got the midweek Carabao Cup semi-final first leg, FA Cup 4th round weekend, Carabao Cup semi-final second leg. You may remember last season, Suj, Burnley versus Watford got added to the FA Cup 4th round weekend.
Because they were both out.
Currently, no fixture can go into that weekend from games that have already been postponed. However...
Why?
Because nothing slots in there. All the teams that are out, there's no combination where teams could have their fixture slotted into the weekend. That could change should Liverpool lose to Wolves in the FA Cup next midweek. Obviously, they have a replay next Tuesday. Obviously, if Liverpool lost, in theory, the Liverpool-Chelsea fixture could be added to the weekend in between game weeks 21 and 22. However, it would be at less than 2 weeks' notice. And of course, any game that's going to get added into that week now would be very short notice. But we've all had very recent experience of Crystal Palace versus Manchester United being announced at less than 2 weeks' notice. So although unlikely, we have to accept it as a possibility. Currently, I don't think anything will be added to that week. There are a lot of people who think that Liverpool and Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, postponed from game week 8, could go into that midweek. When the FA Cup 4th round matches are played, which at the time of recording we don't have the TV schedule, could have an influence. I'll give you an example, Suj. So there's a lot of people currently that think that the Chelsea-Liverpool game could go into the second midweek between 21 and 22, which would at least give a sort of a minimum 10-day gap between Liverpool playing Chelsea in 21 and then playing them again. A couple of issues with that is Chelsea play Fulham on the Friday night in game week 22. Should Liverpool be scheduled to play at Brighton on the Sunday or Monday in the FA Cup fourth round, then that's not going into that midweek.
Are you playing Preston, mate?
Who did I say?
Liverpool-Brighton on the Monday night. Are you playing Preston? That's a shout out to James' dad, if you're listening.
Can I just say, sorry, this is more one for the patrons.
Yeah.
But Manchester City losing last night has really opened up the probability of Tottenham now playing at the weekend rather than the Monday.
Fine. All right, fair play.
Because, for example, Man City and Arsenal could now be on that Monday night, which it couldn't previously, for example.
Yeah,
exactly
understood.
that.
Can I just ask, so in game week 21, between game week 21 and 22 is the fourth round of the FA Cup.
Yeah.
There's 2 midweeks in that.
Yeah, which is designated
so when
for
you
the
say,
League Cup semi-final.
When you say these fixtures could get added to game week 21, which midweek or either or?
More likely the second one because it's further away, so you've got more time to notify fans and stuff. In theory,
so there'd actually even be the fixture would be closer to game week 22 than they will be to the first round of fixtures.
Yeah, but they won't bring the deadline.
No,
forward.
I understand.
They'll never do that.
It's just from my understanding. It's not like they're going to be a tight. It's not going to be a tight double game week.
Fulham Chelsea tonight is much closer to game week 20 than it was to 19, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and there's a fixture in between for a lot of these teams. The FA Cup.
Game week 20 deadline's tomorrow.
There's also the issue that you might pick a double game week player who gets injured in the FA Cup and then can't play the second fixture and stuff. So it's what I'd call a risky double game week because it's so spread.
Yeah. I think fixtures can be added to 22, which is more likely at this stage. Again, look, the further away something is, the more time you've got to notify fans. Crystal Palace and Manchester United went into game week 20 out of an absolute necessity. I'll talk more about United in a bit. In fact, can do it now. There's 3 fixtures that I think are, I would say, probable, and I might be overestimating that when I say probable. Let's say quite possible, but not likely. I don't know what's in the middle. I don't want to say 50% or anything like that because I don't know how you can measure it in terms of percentage. But there are 3 fixtures that I wouldn't be surprised if they got added to 22. One is Liverpool-Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Now, what that means is if it goes in that midweek, obviously you've then at least got another Premier League fixture in between Liverpool playing Chelsea twice because they play Wolves. Liverpool play Wolves at the weekend and Chelsea play Fulham, and there may also be an FA Cup tie in between Liverpool as well. So that would at least be kind of a 2.5 week gap, similar to what we've got currently with obviously United and Palace are going to have a 2.5 week gap between playing each other twice. You should note that midweek of between 22 and 23 is the FA Cup fourth round replays. So, for example, let's say they provisionally announced that Chelsea and Liverpool would go into that midweek, like what the case has been with Manchester City and Tottenham for next week. Should Liverpool be involved in an FA Cup fourth round replay, the game would be postponed again. It would be a provisional announcement in the same way that Manchester City and Tottenham was for game week 20. Had City drawn with Chelsea, City and Tottenham in game week 20 would be off because City would be having an FA Cup replay, for example. The need for Manchester United fixtures is great. Should Manchester United reach the Europa League semi-finals, the FA Cup semi-finals, and the Carabao Cup final, United are now in a position where they would have 4 games to rearrange and only 3 midweeks to fit them in. Hence the need to get the Crystal Palace game arranged. I don't think we will ever know with certainty whether the preference was to play the Crystal Palace fixture or the Leeds fixture. There's a lot of people obviously think that the Manchester United Leeds fixture will go into that midweek. That obviously can't go into 21 now because United have the Carabao Cup semi-finals. 22 could provisionally be announced. The problem with that is the two teams play each other again in game week 23. And it's a problem for a number of fixtures that could potentially be arranged in 21 or 22. Same with Liverpool-Chelsea would play in consecutive Premier League games if that went into 21. If Leeds and United goes into 22, they will play each other in consecutive Premier League fixtures. It might be a necessity. However, I strongly believe that the police will have a big say in this. We understand that United versus Leeds in the Premier League last year was the biggest police operation of any Premier League match at Old Trafford. And that's the fixture you'd be adding in. It is a potential flashpoint for trouble match. And would you want the two sides to play each other twice in a week? It's avoidable. It isn't 100% necessity. That's not me saying it can't happen. I'm just saying logically, the police are likely to go in and go, don't like that. And I also don't think the Premier League want the look of two teams playing each other consecutively. We moaned about Villa-Burnley having to play each other twice right at the end of last season, if you remember, Suj. But at least it wasn't consecutively.
No.
Twice in a week.
Yeah.
That's not to say it can't happen. A lot of people think it will. The draw, I think, because United will be favourites, does add to the possibility of the Brentford fixture in game week 25 being brought forward. I sent a mythical lie tweet out yesterday, which I explained was made up.
Was it a myth or a lie?
It's something that might even happen. But basically, it was an example statement that the Premier League could use to explain that Manchester United and Brentford would provisionally be brought forward into that midweek in game week 22. On the consensus that obviously if United had an FA Cup fourth round replay and reached the Carabao Cup final, the game's off completely. Or if United lose to Nottingham Forest in the Carabao Cup semi-final, it stays where it is. But one way round the United Leeds playing each other twice headache is to potentially bring the Brentford fixture forward. Now, that would have to be, and I still think this could happen because this is more likely how the Premier League would work, I think that could even be announced at 7 days' notice.
Wow.
I really think that's a possibility. So we could be sitting here the night United play Nottingham Forest in the League Cup semi-final and then find out the next day United and Brentford's got added to 22 once we know United have reached the final because they go, oh shit, we've got to do this, which is bang out of order on the fans, which I always scream about. And that's why...
That I think you need to... give up any hope that they're going to give a shit about the fans.
Well, look, they get enough abuse from supporters groups saying, tell us. If you just explain the situation to the fans, then fans will understand. They'll go, okay, well, if that happens and that happens, fine. We play the United-Brentford game's going to be here. Yeah. The reason they don't like doing it and the clubs don't like doing it is because it's made it look like, oh, we think we're going to win. No, just use some common sense and logic and understanding and explain if in the eventuality of United reaching the Carabao Cup final, we're going to bring the Brentford game forward. Of course, they could do that. And should United draw with Reading in the Cup, it still wouldn't happen. But I do think a United-Brentford arrangement could even be as little as sort of 7-8 days notice. I do think that's a possibility. Which is no good for anybody, but it's a possibility. So be aware of that. United Leeds, I wouldn't expect at sort of 7 days' notice. I'd be surprised, but it's not beyond possibility either. We would hope that we would get some announcement today or tomorrow.
That was going to be my question. When do you think it's fair? But this is for game week 21, 22.
Yeah, it might even be that by the time you listen to this or are watching this, it's possible that there's been an announcement. I can see the YouTube comments already. It's been announced, James. Shut up. This isn't live. So be aware of the possibility. In essence, to kind of cover it off as an overview, in theory, any fixture that's been postponed previously that doesn't involve the 4 teams in the Carabao Cup semi-final could, in theory, go into 21. The priority games are obviously Liverpool and Chelsea in the Champions League, but not so much Chelsea because they're out of the FA Cup.
Yep.
And obviously Manchester United because of the backlog problem. Those are the priorities. The build-up of, say, Brighton fixtures is not so much of a concern. Brighton can play the majority of their rearranged games Champions League midweeks, it doesn't matter. There isn't an urgency. Obviously, they'll get to a certain build-up point where they'll be like, they've got too many games in hand. We need to do something about that. but it isn't an urgency to be arranging a Brighton game at 2 weeks' notice. I don't think it will happen. Game week 22, Chelsea versus Liverpool, United versus Leeds, United versus Brentford are all possibles to go into that midweek.
So I've got triple Liverpool, Robertson, Salah, and Nunez.
Here's the thing. So,
and I was going to sell 2 of them bastards this week for like maybe a United defender and KDB who have a double this week that I know about. Versus then, do I hold on to them for a couple of weeks for?
This is part of the reason. That's what the example you give is a great example. You're thinking, and there'll be loads of people listening. I'm going to go from Salah to De Bruyne because KDB's got a double now, and he's got another double in 23, and even added to the fact I now know he's got a fixture in game week 25. He doesn't blank, for example. But you'll be sick if you do that, and Chelsea and Liverpool gets added to 21. You go, I'm just going to jump back to Salah. Now, of course, you can hokey-cokey it, the sort of thing we talk about a lot in Sky. But if you've got any other issues in your squad, that becomes problematic, doesn't it? Excuse me. So the 2 games most likely to be postponed in game week 25 currently are United-Brentford that I've spoken about, and Brighton versus Newcastle. There are 2 other games that could obviously get postponed if either Southampton or Forest make the League Cup final. Those are Leeds against Southampton, or I believe it includes your own mob, Suj, West Ham against Nottingham Forest in game week 25. The United-Brentford game is the only one that I can see being brought forward. The midweek after the Carabao Cup final is also the FA Cup 5th round. Now, once we've got these 3rd round replays that involve Liverpool, Wolves, Leeds, and also the FA Cup 4th round out of the way, and we know the 5th round draw, it's not impossible that 5th round matches could go into that midweek. So let me give you an example of the sort of thing that could happen, Suj. Newcastle make the Carabao Cup final. Brighton and Newcastle is postponed. Brighton lose to Liverpool in the FA Cup 4th round. The game literally just moves to the midweek.
Right.
There will be a blank in 25. That's almost a certainty. But it is even possible that Brighton-Newcastle, for example, could just stay in the same week. It's possible. And that goes for many other fixtures. So Brighton's fixtures with Bournemouth are already out of the Cup, could go in that midweek if they're out. Brighton and Palace are already out of the Cup, could go into that midweek, for example. But again, the games obviously that don't involve European teams, obviously less essential, don't necessarily have to go into that midweek. What you might make the case of and say, let's say United don't get the extra fixture in game week 22 and they lose to Reading in the FA Cup 4th round. Similarly, you could make the case Brentford are out the Cup. It could just stay in the same week. It's not impossible that Manchester United and Newcastle was the Carabao Cup final and those 2 fixtures might literally move into the same midweek.
Right.
I don't think that would happen, but it's not impossible. But I think the fact that City have gone out last night should certainly help people with their planning, because obviously City are now going to have a fixture, for example. There'll be many with, obviously the majority of you will have Kieran Trippier, a lot of you will have Marcus Rashford at the moment, but whether you've got 6 Manchester United and Newcastle players, you might do. But be aware that obviously as you move towards 25, that is the most likely fixture. You will know before game week 22 what the Carabao Cup final is going to be. Just be aware that if United and Brentford or Brighton and Newcastle are out of the FA Cup, it could even in theory stay in the same game week. Not impossible.
Which is the FA Cup 5th round weekend?
So it's midweek.
Okay,
so
fine.
It's a midweek. So
it's
you've
not
got
going to affect.
No, so you've got
at all.
You've got the Carabao Cup final on the weekend of 25, and the midweek immediately following is the FA Cup 5th round.
So FA Cup quarters
is game week 28.
It's quite a way away.
It is
2 rounds still to get through.
It's going to be almost certainly, I can say that with 99%. The biggest blank game week of the season. And quite often we end up using it as a free hit to cover up. Last year we had like Tottenham, West Ham, Arsenal at Villa. There was 4 fixtures, I believe. It wasn't a great game week. We already know 3 fixtures that are going to happen in game week 28. And they're all quite interesting.
I mean, the thing is, we've got 2 more rounds of the FA Cup before we get there. I think we'd calculated, 6 or 7 teams from the Premier League already out the FA Cup. And in the next 2 rounds, at least 3 or 4 more are going to go. I don't know how many all Premier League ties there are in the 4th round. Man City, Arsenal.
There's not many. Obviously, Brighton against Liverpool or Wolves. That's it.
So there's 2 more that are definitely going to go out, and then maybe a couple more by the 5th round.
You said there's a maximum of 9 teams that could get to the FA Cup 5th round from the Premier League.
Yeah, so we'll have 5 fixtures. Oh, we won't have 5 fixtures, but it might be as many as 5 because they could rearrange 2 teams that have been out that might need to play each other, that kind of thing.
That can happen. We had that with Aston Villa and Tottenham a couple of years ago in the lockdown season, where they had a game that needs to be rearranged, and both their opponents had made it through to the cup quarterfinals, but they were out, so the fixture could go in.
So just free hit is the question in my mind I'm thinking about, because I've got, I could possibly be on free Newcastle, couple of Man United, that if their games are rearranged in 25, to stay in 25, no need to use any chips, even if it's just one of them, and off we go.
I certainly wouldn't free hit in 25.
Nah. But
no matter
if
what.
I wanted to, no matter what, you'd dead end to it.
You would just go through it, wouldn't you? Let's say United and Newcastle to Carabao Cup final, right? That's the most likely thing at the moment. Let's say people are sitting there with Trippier, Botman, Almiron. Let's go worst case scenario. Trippier, Almiron, Botman. You've got 3 Newcastle, and you might be sitting there with, I don't know, Shaw, Rashford, Martial as an example. You're sitting there right now with 6 of them. Come off a few of them.
You got Fulham have got Wolves at home. So Pereira, Mitrovic, people will be on Pereira, Mitrovic.
Well, that's it. So your bench is obviously, this is, as you're heading towards 25, you need to start thinking about your bench. So there's perfect case. If you take my regular bench as an example right now, I go, am I happy to field Andreas Pereira if he ends up staying at home to Wolves in 25? Yes. Am I happy to field Hugo Bueno in the same fixture? A little less so, but it's not disastrous. Am I happy to field Sam Greenwood if Leeds play Southampton? Well, that's a bit more iffy. So for me, I probably want to, if Sam Greenwood ends up staying part of my structure, I probably only want to go into game week 25 with only 2 players from United and Newcastle as a maximum, unless one of them's my goalkeeper, then 3. Otherwise, I'm going to have to start Greenwood, don't I? Make sense?
Understood.
So this is getting to the point of the season we need to start considering your bench. Doesn't mean you can't have a crap, cheap bench. You just need to consider your options. Game week 28, the FA Cup quarter-final weekend, which will certainly cause some postponements. Currently, there are 3 fixtures that we know will definitely happen in that weekend. Those are Aston Villa against Bournemouth, which is the sort of one I think would appeal on a free hit, where you go, I don't really want Villa players. Oh, I'm to Bournemouth. Oh, I'd treble up on Villa for a free hit. Say there's only 3 or 4 fixtures. Chelsea against Everton, same. We've got a clear dominant side that we'd want to invest in. And even the 3rd fixture is Nottingham Forest against Newcastle.
You wouldn't pile in on West Ham? We'll be in the 5th round of the Cup. We're supposed to play Man City that weekend, folks.
And away. If either City or West Ham make the FA Cup quarter-final, obviously that fixture would move. Unlike with 25, fixtures can definitely not stay in 28 because it's internationals immediately afterwards. There is no chance of game week 28 being a double for anyone.
Understood.
Now, we've got those 3 fixtures clarified now, and you'd make a case that if they're the only 3 fixtures and you don't have much coverage from them, treble Newcastle, treble Chelsea, treble Villa, little bit of scraps from elsewhere, that's it. That's your free hit. There is no guarantee that additional fixtures will be added to game week 28. The most likely fixture currently to be added to game week 28, in my opinion, is Arsenal and Crystal Palace. That's because Arsenal have got Man City away in the FA Cup 4th round. And of course, now that City are out of the Carabao Cup, that's a bad result for Arsenal, by the way. City have got no fixtures in the midweek prior or the midweek afterwards. Admittedly, the same case for Arsenal. But City, there's every reason for City to pick their strongest team against Arsenal in the Cup, is my point. It's not to say that City will definitely beat Arsenal. It's not. But obviously, City will be favourites at home. So imagine adding Arsenal and Crystal Palace to that game week. Let's just say it's those 4 fixtures. We're happy to have Arsenal assets, aren't we? We're happy to have Newcastle assets. And actually, even if you look at Chelsea in the run-up to game week 28, decent fixtures. After they play Liverpool in 21, you got Fulham, West Ham, Southampton, Tottenham, Leeds, Leicester, Everton. We could potentially start investing in them to build up. And if you went into game week 28 with 3 Arsenal, 3 Newcastle and 2 Chelsea and there was only 4 fixtures, is that enough? Yeah, probably.
But then you do have to use your chips sometime.
You do. My point being is that I think the way the fixtures are going to land, using the free hit in game week 28 is going to be less appealing. There is a caveat to that. The immediate week afterwards, game week 29, is going to be a big double game week. That's almost a certainty. And a lot of the fixtures that have been postponed previously because of the Queen's passing are likely to go into that week. Games that are postponed in game week 28 can go into game week 29. So it's worth noting, if you are using your free hit in 28, that might better manage around planning for the double game week in 29. We're going to go through a couple of different options of perhaps how you may want to think about using chips. But it is something to bear in mind that, yeah, City might blank in 28, but they'll probably then have a double in 29, if that's the case. And so you have to bear that sort of thing into your thinking. And obviously, the further we go through the weeks, the more we can look at how this will likely be. The chance in game week 28 is, I think this year will probably land with probably 5 fixtures. I think. There's even some, again, like the FA Cup 5th round weekend. I'll give you an example currently. So Brentford are scheduled to play Leicester in game week 28 currently. Leicester have a good draw in the 4th round away to Walsall. While Southampton are scheduled to play Tottenham in game week 28. Now, currently, the betting odds would suggest that Tottenham and Leicester are likely to make the FA Cup quarterfinals. Southampton and Brentford are already out. They've got a fixture to rearrange. So again, it's not impossible that could get added, for example, into game week 28. I always think it should be the preferred option. If a game can be arranged for a weekend, it should be arranged for a weekend rather than a midweek. So there are fixtures that could even go into 28 that you can't currently see that may go into there, for example. Game weeks 29, 34 and 37 are all available for rearranged fixtures. At this moment in time, we cannot guarantee which one will be the biggest. If you say, which is going to be the biggest double? Honestly, none of us can guarantee and say it will be 29 or 34. I think 37 is the least likely to be the biggest. There's a couple of reasons why that is the case. Game week 32 will cause blanks for the FA Cup semi-finals. And again, immediately following that is a midweek set of Premier League fixtures, game week 33. So game week 32, in terms of, say, like with 25, where I said in theory the fixtures could even stay in that week, that's not going to happen in game week 32. They will have to go somewhere else. Logical sense would currently suggest that games postponed because of the Queen's passing, a lot of them would go into game week 29. You could make the case that FA Cup quarter-final postponements then go into 34 and FA Cup semi-final postponements go into game week 37. It never works out as logically simple as that because different teams have different needs and different complications. The Manchester United problem. So, as I said, should United continue to progress in the cup competitions, you've got 4 potential postponements for 3 midweeks. There is a manipulation that could be done should neither United's fixtures with Brentford or Leeds get added into 22, for example. Because remember, should United beat Barcelona in Europa League last 16 and make the FA Cup 5th round, they would have no available midweeks before the March international break. And that's what we mean about having 4 postponements to go into 3 midweeks.
Well, they'd have a free midweek in 29 or 34 or 37.
Yeah, but 4 fixtures to go into them, Suj. I want to give you a manipulation example of something that could happen in the worst case scenario. After the March international breaks, Manchester United are scheduled to play Newcastle. You could put that fixture on the Saturday. Let's then say they have the rearranged fixture with Leeds go on the Tuesday. Game week 30, they're scheduled to play Everton. Stick it on the Friday night. Stick the rearranged game with Brentford on the Monday. Then play Europa League on the Thursday. What that would do is give United back-to-back double game weeks in 29 and 30. This is very unlikely, by the way. It's just to highlight that there is a manipulation of the fixtures that can happen. That can also happen in game weeks 34 and 35. That manipulation could also happen. I think treble game weeks this year are incredibly unlikely. Should there be one, it probably would be Manchester United, where they would probably play 3 games in game week 37 because they've the schedule up, basically. I think very unlikely we would have treble game weeks this season. There's also a game week 35 problem, which we touched on near the start, which we currently have no clarification on what the situation is. And this is why I think currently the Premier League would rather keep at least the Champions League teams out of game week 37 in their thinking for schedule rearrangements. Now, obviously, I'm not going to rearrange a fixture now for game week 37 midweek, but should the Champions League teams, Liverpool, City, Tottenham and Chelsea, reach the quarterfinals of the Champions League, you'll certainly have to start arranging game week 34 before you know how they've got on in the Champions League quarterfinals. And there's a reason why I think those 4 teams currently should be left out of 37. Game week 35, May the 8th, is the King's Coronation. It's going to be held on the Saturday in the morning. I thought it
was on the Sunday.
No, okay. It's a Saturday. We currently do not know if the Premier League are going to be allowed to have fixtures on that day or not. I would suggest it's probably going to be a not. Now, that's not a huge problem because it might be that all the fixtures will just be played on the Sunday. Is a possibility.
Be nice.
Maybe.
I mean, it would be nice if they just did what they do on the last day of the season. Just play them all at the fucking same time. 3 o'clock on the Sunday.
I think that game weeks 37 and 38, this is what they've commonly done in Spain for a long time. The last 2 weeks should all be played at the same time, is my opinion. So
Man United at home that weekend.
You think, right, so there's no problem, right? Here we good mention. So game week 35, in theory, could it be that all the fixtures move to the Sunday? Yes, possibly. It's also going to be an added bank holiday on the Monday because of the Coronation. So actually, in theory, all the games could even be on the Monday. Problem is, the midweek afterwards is the Champions League semi-final first legs. Ain't going to make someone play a Premier League game on a Sunday and then play on the Tuesday in the Champions League semi-final. No. That's not going to happen, is it?
No. So you can play on the Wednesday.
Yeah, but the problem is UEFA will decide when teams play. It's not, the Premier League will not have a say in, right, we need our team to play on the Wednesday in the Champions League. They will not have a say. And in any case, if we've got, let's say, City and Liverpool reach the Champions League semi-finals and they're in alternate semi-finals, someone's definitely playing that Tuesday, aren't they? They'd have to, because you know that the games will be on different days.
Yep.
So one solution you may say is, we'll put the game forward to the Friday. That's the obvious. Yeah, but you can't necessarily do that because you've got the full midweek Premier League schedule the week before for the midweek fixtures, potentially. Now, you could say, well, they might not have games to reschedule. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you mentioned West Ham, Manchester United. Now, that game, because it's in London as well, and a high-profile fixture because it involves Manchester United, is a sort of fixture that would potentially be at risk, I think is fair to say. Let's take the example that Liverpool that weekend play Brentford at home. Okay, not a massive concern problem. So you could say, could Liverpool play Brentford on the Friday night and play a midweek rearranged fixture in game week 34 on the Tuesday? Yes, that could happen. Could they play midweek Tuesday, game week 35 Friday, Champions League semi-final Tuesday? Yes, they absolutely could. Until you get the problem that Liverpool have drawn Manchester United in the FA Cup semi-finals, and that game would have to be a Sunday if Manchester United was still in Europa League. And you're back to the square root one problem of someone having to play a high-profile fixture twice in 3 days. There's problems ahead, potentially. Now, it could be that they're going to go, there's no problem here. Everyone can play on the Saturday. But there's a couple of fixtures. West Ham United is one, so it could even be another United problem, possibly.
Play later in the day.
I think in the West Ham United situation, I think the Sunday or the Monday would probably be all right. And obviously, United, if they're still in Europa semi-finals, is the Thursday. Could they play Monday and Thursday? The answer to that question is yes.
Maybe. I have to check my diary.
But it's more of a problem.
Bring me Premier League.
It's more of a problem potentially for the Champions League semi-finals. It's not so much of a problem for United. But if any of those Champions League semi-finalists also draw Manchester United in an FA Cup semi-final and United are still in the Europa, something's getting postponed. And that's why I think they would like to leave game week 37 currently available for the Champions League teams. That adds some weight towards 29 and 34 being bigger midweeks. I also think as well, currently we've got a title race, which, sorry United fans, involves City and Arsenal. And I think if they want to keep City out of 37, they'll probably want to keep Arsenal out of 37 as well. One of the things the Premier League won't want to do but may have to do, what they don't like to do is arrange someone that finishes with 2 home games or 2 away games. If you think back to the 3 fixtures that got added into game week 37 midweek last season, Villa versus Burnley, Chelsea versus Leicester, and Everton versus Crystal Palace, all of those teams had opposite fixtures in game week 38 on the final day. What I mean by that is, for example, Everton were home to Crystal Palace in 37, then away to Arsenal in 38. Crystal Palace were away to Everton in 37, then at home to Manchester United in game week 38. That happened. All 6 of those teams who played in the midweek of 37 went from an away game to a home game or a home game to an away game. So they didn't have consecutive home games or consecutive away games.
Which is the case this season as well.
What's that?
That everybody's home and then away or away then home.
That's what they'd like to do. So let me give you some examples of things that could potentially happen. So let's take Liverpool. Liverpool currently have games to rearrange with Wolves and Chelsea. Should they continue to progress in the FA Cup, they have fixtures to rearrange with Fulham at home and Nottingham Forest at home. Now, they finish with Southampton away, so you go, oh, that works. Yeah, but the problem is that Fulham and Forest also have away games in 38. So do they want to schedule that? It's, say, particularly in Forest's case, who may well be fighting to stay up, do they want Nottingham Forest to finish with 2 away games, with Liverpool away and Crystal Palace away? I'd think that's doubtful. Fulham, for the record, would finish with Liverpool away and Manchester United away. And it's why currently I would think that the most likely Manchester United fixture to go into 37 would be the fixture at Brighton if that was postponed because of the FA Cup quarter-finals. And that's because it's the only one of the rearranged fixtures that would have the home and away balance in game week 37. Now, however, the way this schedule works, there's chances are someone is going to have to do that, play twice at home or twice away. It's possible that there's a manipulation that may have to happen to Newcastle, for example. They may have to finish with a trip to West Ham and a trip to Chelsea, or Tottenham may have to finish with a trip to Newcastle and a trip to Leeds. But there's certain things that add weight to game week 37 being smaller than 29 or 34. There are only 2 teams currently, Suj, that can't have a blank game week. Do you know who they are? If you want your coverage of your cheap defenders on your bench,
can't have a blank game week.
Only rest of the season can't have a blank game week unless COVID, King's Coronation, that kind of stuff.
Yes, I do know who they are. That's Fulham.
No.
And Man City, no.
No. The answers are Villa and Everton.
Right.
Which are we telling me that for? Well, if you need your bench to cover you sometimes through blank game weeks and stuff.
Are they the only 2 teams that are out of both cup competitions? Is that why they can't have another blank game week?
And their opponents in 29 and 32 are also.
Okay.
Aston Villa and Everton's fixtures in game week 29 and game week 32 are locked. Aston Villa play Bournemouth in 29, and in game week 32 they go to Brentford. Everton go to Chelsea in 29.
Play Chelsea in 29.
No, Aston Villa play Bournemouth in 29.
That's 28.
I don't know what you're looking at, Suj.
Okay, you're a planner.
Sell the planner properly. I worry about what you're looking at, possibly.
I'm sure I'm looking at that. Let me check my eyes. That's Aston Villa. That's Bournemouth at home. That's 28.
Yeah.
You just said they played Bournemouth in 29.
Oh, I meant 28. That's the problem. That's the blank.
Right.
Sorry. Aston Villa against Bournemouth in 28 and Brentford in 32. Those 2 teams are out of the cup. And for Everton, they play Chelsea in 28 and they play Crystal Palace in 32. They're both out of the cup. So those 2 teams are locked in. Now, it might be that you might not want to use your wildcard till game week 33. So Patterson's obviously, unfortunately, is out injured for a while. But players like him, Tyrone Mings, if he stays in the Villa team when Diogo Carlos gets fit, might be the sort of players that you may want to consider as potential enablers, because they're always going to have a fixture. Doesn't mean it's always a good fixture, by the way. Suggested chip usage. From what we've discussed so far, Suj, is there anything that you'd think you've got a preference for? I'm just going to leave triple captaincy out of the thinking about this for the moment.
So traditional thinking is always free hit to cover a blank, and then wildcard to set yourself up for a bench boost with 15 doublers. That's like where we've always thought about it historically. If there's the opportunity... Question first before I answer that question. We won't... When the 29 double is announced, will that then give us an indication of what the 34 double looks like?
It would certainly help. Yeah, because we eliminate a load of fixtures from 34 because they've gone into 29,
and
right?
The leftover will probably be 34. So we can make that assumption, would you feel, at 29?
In terms of what's the best week? Yes.
So, dream scenario would be if there's teams that play in 28 and double in 29, wildcard before that, and I get them for the... Say that again. If they play in 28 and double in 29...
Yeah, and this is possible.
I could wildcard into those and get a full team of 11 and doublers in 29, which would be good. That will use a wildcard then. But I'd like to otherwise free hit and bench boost in a double. So... that's probably what I'm looking at. If I could wildcard into 28 and all of those doubled in 29, I'd bench boost in 29 and free hit in 34. I think my preference is to try and use both free hit and bench boost for 29, 34, if the fixtures allow me to.
There's certain things that can happen in terms of teams playing 28 and 29. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's say Arsenal lose to Man City in the FA Cup. Their fixture against Crystal Palace will go ahead in game week 28. Then the Everton fixture could get added to 29, right? It's possible. So Arsenal could cover the blank and then play a double. And the double, by the way, would be Leeds at home and Everton at home. I mean, we'd all have... if we were running through, we'd all have treble Arsenal, wouldn't we? It'd be an absolute certainty with those 3 home fixtures. Worth saying, small caveat, that I do think there is a small chance Arsenal-Everton could get added to game week 24, but I think that's becoming increasingly unlikely. That's an available midweek that Arsenal have because they don't play in Europa League last 32 stage. But I think the chances are, the way it's looking, Arsenal will have availability later in the season. Even if Arsenal did make the FA Cup semi-finals, they'd have games with Everton, Palace and Southampton to rearrange. But 3 midweek fixtures to rearrange to go into 3 midweeks. It could be done. The only thing I would say with that is that's another one. It would guarantee that Arsenal finish with 2 home games.
Right.
Because they have three games to rearrange. They'd all be home games and they finish with a home fixture against Wolves. So that sort of thing. I think if Arsenal beat City in the Cup, that would increase the possibility of Arsenal-Everton going into 24. If Arsenal lose to City, I'd be very surprised if it went in there. But a different example would be, let's say that Man City go out of the FA Cup to Arsenal, and so do West Ham, and the West Ham fixture goes ahead in 28. Well, if that's the situation, we know City got no more doubles.
Yep.
So if you're planning to run through and then get to doublers, again, once we get beyond the 4th round of the FA Cup, we can really begin to make proper hypotheses of what this will look like. Some suggested ideas for you. Free hit 28, as you'd mentioned. Wildcard 33 to bench boost in 34, most likely, or 37. Another idea could be to wildcard in game week 29. So you move to 28, you dead end your team into the blank quarterfinals, and you wildcard literally into the double of 29. Free hit FA Cup semi-finals, maybe even to cover. Bench boost 34. It's worth saying as well, 32 could look uglier than 28 despite having more fixtures.
Okay.
And the reason for that is there's certain fixtures like Newcastle against Tottenham, United against Chelsea scheduled for that weekend, where if they stay in the week, might not look so nice, particularly if you've lost a few other fixtures that perhaps are more attractive, like Arsenal at home to Southampton and Liverpool at home to Nottingham Forest, for example. Wildcard 27, if 29 looks like it's going to be the biggest, you could make a case, say, wildcard 27, free hit 28 to manoeuvre around the problem, use the bench boost in 29. it might even be that it just lands so perfectly that we can run through and just bench boost 29, wildcard in 34 on the next double, and then maybe free hit in the last double in 37. You could wildcard 29 to set up for a bench boost in 34, for example. So you wildcard on the double, bench boost 34 again, perhaps use the free hit to cover either 28, 32 or 37. But the one I prefer the most at the moment, and again, this is very subject to what fixtures may happen, would be to run through to 28 and actually carry through 28 to 32. The majority of teams that play in 28 are also going to play in 32. And currently the fixtures for 28 look like they're going to be okay. So you run through 28 and 32. Free hit for the first double, 29. Wildcard 33 to bench boost for the second big double. That's my current favoured strategy. It is completely dependent on obviously where the fixtures land, which again, the further we go ahead in the process, the more we'll begin to understand. So I think free hit, you're kind of 5 options, if you will. You've got 3 double game weeks, 29, 34, 37. Use them to be aggressive or use them to cover up one of the blanks, 28 or 32. If you're going to use it in a blank, because there's going to be more fixtures in 32 than 28, 28 would most likely make more sense. But as I said, 32, even with more fixtures, might look quite ugly. Okay. And it might be you want a free hit and dip into a few teams who have perhaps got good fixtures who perhaps you might not have wanted to consider otherwise, for example. Bench boost, I think it's going to be 29, 34, 37. I do think 29 or 34 will be the biggest, but again, to repeat what I said previously, there's no way of knowing what will be the biggest. Wild card, I think there's a number of different ways you can do it. Perhaps 29 is set up for 27 is set up for a 29 bench boost. Wild card on 29 itself could almost act like a free hit, and as a setup, 33 to plan to bench boost 34, or it might even be you want a wild card 34 and bench boost 37.
If you dead ended into it, maybe. Oh no, wild card in 34. Set yourself up with doublers for the rest of the season.
Could be that you can see the picture and go, I like all these teams, but I prefer 37 for the bench boost. Is possible. There's no way of knowing for certain this early in the season. Now, we obviously haven't spoken about triple captaincy, and that's what's on many people's minds going into this week.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway now is that these are future problems. Free hit, bench boost, wild card.
Well, the problem is as well is if you identify, say, 29 or 34 as the best week for a triple captaincy, you might want to bear in mind that you might be wanting to use your bench boost in those weeks. So consider that. I personally think triple captaincy is the worst of the chips. Last year we were very blessed, right?
And the year before. I think we feel like we've had a couple of years where we had the Trent 24-pointer. That might have been 3 years ago.
You might have had that. I didn't.
Okay. But there's been a few years.
But last year, obviously, you had Salah land with Norwich at home and Leeds at home. I mean, you couldn't make up 2 better fixtures. And it landed perfectly with no real concerns of rotation or anything, the way the schedule worked. Yeah. Big haul. And obviously those who waited later and had Kevin De Bruyne or even Richarlison or Kane, they all seem to do quite well, actually, other than pretty much Salah, ironically, in 36. And so I think there is a recency bias that triple captaincy can be, whoa, but actually most often it's not.
10 points?
To be honest, I always, if you get 10 or above, I always say, should be pretty happy with that. Yeah. And so with 2 fixtures for Erling Haaland, where he's extremely unlikely to be rotated right in front of you, why am I still sitting here and thinking I'm not going to do it?
Because it's Man United and Tottenham.
Well, I think that's part of the reason. I just think Manchester City, I really, really don't think all is well at the moment. And that watching them last night only added to that. Not a single shot on target. And I know it was kind of a rotated team and stuff.
Still, their rotated team.
How the fuck do you not have a shot on target against Southampton?
That's mad.
Southampton were good, by the way. And Matt Samuel was a lot happier than he was on Tuesday's Clash of the Correspondents.
Probably still lose to Everton, though.
He probably, yeah. The Evertonians might disagree with that. In any case, what I want to do here is run through a potential for triple captaincies, or i.e. best case scenario of double game weeks for main players to consider for the rest of the season. So we know Haaland has 2 doubles left. United away, Tottenham at home. Well, I say 2 left, 2 that we know that will happen this coming week. Game week 23, Villa at home and Arsenal away. I have a slight preference of the two for 23. And the reason I have a slight preference for that is the first immediate fixture right in front of my face is Villa at home. And that's just why I have a slight preference for that one if I'm going to use it. Now, let's be honest. United away and Arsenal away for City are probably, for them specifically, along with Liverpool, two of the three hardest fixtures they could have. Yes, maybe Newcastle away as well. And you've got one of them in the double. It's not a great double. But he's still Erling Haaland, right? And we know he can go off at any time. Do I think he's going to go off big in this particular double? No. Am I going to captain him? Yes, definitely. Do I think he's going to go big enough that I think he's the best triple captaincy this season? I'm leaning into no. But the other caveat is you can be almost certain he's getting 180 minutes here as well. Whereas you might look at the Villa-Arsenal double and go, oh, he could get rotated against Villa. Possibly. I think that's less likely because City would have a free midweek unless they have an FA Cup fourth round replay, which is, of course, possible. Arsenal and City could definitely be a draw, right? It could go to a replay. But it's most probable that they have a free midweek before Villa. Therefore, why wouldn't he play? Okay. And he'd definitely play at the Emirates, wouldn't he? Yeah. You would think. Yeah. Unless Guardiola decides to come up with one of his radical plans. Now, again, obviously, look, if City go out to Arsenal in the Cup, it's possible there's no more doubles. Possibilities down the line is obviously adding doubles to the weeks where we know there can be double game weeks. City are scheduled to play Liverpool in game week 29. So the double, if it landed, would be Liverpool at home and West Ham at home. Is two home fixtures. Is that better? And obviously this is no guarantee that it would happen. Liverpool at home and West Ham at home. Is that better than either of these current two he's got?
No.
Game week 34, City go to Fulham. The extra fixture would be West Ham at home or Brighton away. Is that better?
Probably, but it's so far in the future.
And obviously, game week 37, they're scheduled to play Chelsea. Now, I did say they'll try and keep that free, I think, for the Champions League teams. But only free as a contingency. So they could play Chelsea at home and West Ham at home, or Chelsea at home and Brighton away, or, heaven forbid, if their fixture from 35 got thrown out, it's Leeds at home. Now, this is an extremely minute possibility. I think what we're saying is the doubles aren't looking great. The best case scenario is gone, and that was Fulham away and Bournemouth away in 34. The other caveat, of course, to later in the season is if they're still in the Champions League, rotation. And that's not a rotation for what you can see right in front of your face. And because his EO is going to be so high, and let's be honest, he has been the best FPL player this season in terms of points returns, I think naturally he's the player that you do probably want to put it on. I wouldn't tell anybody not to do it this week, but I don't think it's going to be me. I would prefer to have, I think, more understanding of potential possibilities further down the line. And it might be that Haaland's not the player that ends up getting the triple captaincy. Thoughts?
23.
So you'd prefer 23 than 20 of the two?
Yeah.
I think I'm on that as well. That's not to say I'm going to do it in 23. I just think I prefer 23.
Yeah.
Okay. Mo Salah. Well, of course, he could land quite quickly with this Chelsea and Chelsea double. Or he could land with Chelsea and Wolves. In game week 22, he could land with Wolves away and Chelsea away. Or Wolves twice even is another possibility for game week 22. Game week 25, should Liverpool be out the FA Cup, they go to Crystal Palace. Then you could perhaps put the Chelsea or Wolves fixtures into there. Obviously, Chelsea are out of the FA Cup. Although that might be a difficult one to put in there because Chelsea-Liverpool will definitely be on the TV. Whereas, say, if they want to put Bournemouth v Brighton in that midweek, it's less of a problem. I'm sure that BBC and ITV will want to show TV games in the FA Cup fifth round Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Ain't going to be happy if Sky try and throw Chelsea v Liverpool in there, but it is a possibility. Game week 26, I really think, is where Liverpool's rearranged fixture with Wolves will go. The other fixture that week is Manchester United at home. Do we like that more? And I think that's a probable. Manchester United at home and Wolves at home in game week 26 as a Liverpool double for Mo.
I can't see myself not triple captaining Erling Haaland.
Okay.
I look at it. But what am I comparing? I'm not comparing Salah against Salah. I'm not comparing Salah's 25 or 26, 29 or 34 against Salah's own double game weeks. I'm comparing any of his double game weeks against Haaland 23, Villa, Arsenal. 2 home fixtures. Also, Liverpool aren't that good at the moment. So
no, but there's nothing to say that won't change.
That's 25, 26. That's like 4 or 5 game weeks away. So I don't feel like that's enough time for me to think, Liverpool are a changed team.
But between now and then, like the Champions League tie with Real Madrid and stuff, the first leg at least, they might play well in that.
I can't see myself. I don't think any of Salah's doubles would be better than that. Villa, Arsenal for Haaland.
Okay. Game week 29, I'm going to skip because Liverpool go to Manchester City. So that's certainly not going to be your best triple captaincy opportunity. Liverpool is scheduled to play Tottenham at home in game week 34. Now, obviously, the Chelsea Wolves fixtures, if not been arranged, could obviously be added to that. But the games that Liverpool could have postponed in the FA Cup, respectively, are Fulham at home and Nottingham Forest at home. And those are attractive. So if you add Tottenham at home and Fulham on Nottingham Forest at home in 34, that looks good. And equally, again, potential contingency, they've got Villa at home in 37. What if he suddenly goes on a run and he's 4 behind Haaland going into game week 37 or something?
More attractive.
And he's got Villa at home and Forest at home, for example.
Villa at home, Forest at home, game week 37, more attractive.
So I think all I would say to that is, I think there is possibility, certainly, I think the 26, which I think will happen, United and Wolves, I think is okay. Remember, it is 2 home fixtures. That's important with Liverpool. I think 34 or 37 could look good for Salah. Tottenham might be 7th in the league doing nothing at that point, mate. Talk of the devil. What about Harry Kane? I'm seeing people...
higher 7th, yeah?
Be higher than you anyway, boy. Harry Kane, talk of the devil. I've seen a few people think the triple captain this week.
Okay.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I know across the 2 same fixtures last year, he got 26 points. Tottenham are playing the 2 best teams in the country in the next week. That doesn't make sense to me. The best possible week for a Harry Kane double game week, I think, would be game week 29, and it would be Everton away and Southampton away. And I think the instinct to that is, 2 away games. Harry scores just as many away as he scores at home. We know this historically. And I think that's quite nice, potentially. Everton away and Southampton away. That could easily be the bottom 2 this season. That's okay. Tottenham go to Liverpool in 34, as already mentioned, so you certainly wouldn't want that week. Tottenham do have Brentford at home in 37. Southampton away or Newcastle away would be added fixtures to that. If the King's Coronation postponed their 35 fixture, then possibly, very minuscule chance, you could have Brentford at home and Palace at home in 37. But I think for Kane, it would be 29. Arsenal. It would be triple captain if we were going for an Arsenal player. Saka?
I only own Martinelli,
right.
And I don't know when I'm going back to any of the others.
It could be that one of them picks up quite a bit of form, for example, though. Obviously, they have Brentford and City at home in 23. It is 2 home games. Mm-hmm. But I concede that we probably don't even know which one would be the preferred option at the moment. The Everton fixtures I mentioned previously could be added to 24. Arsenal go to Villa in their first fixture that week. Game week 25, should Arsenal be at the FA Cup, I guess the Everton fixture could go in there. Arsenal go to Leicester that week. That's not bad. Leicester away, Everton at home. Game week 29 could be very interesting. Arsenal host Leeds. We'd already mentioned it briefly. If Arsenal were to have a double there in 29, you've got Leeds at home and Everton or Crystal Palace as the other fixture.
That's the most attractive there. Arsenal, very much I want to go with home fixtures for them.
In terms of fixtures, that might be the best of the lot. Arsenal have Chelsea at home in 34. Remember, I said the 3 Arsenal games that could be rearranged are all home fixtures. So what I would say is you're almost guaranteed if Arsenal have extra fixtures that the second fixture in the double is going to be good. Everton at home, Palace at home, Southampton at home. Also, game week 37, Arsenal go to Nottingham Forest. So again, could you have right at the end of the season a differential Saka or Martinelli, Odegaard, Jesus, triple captaincy, Forest away, and one of Everton, Palace, Southampton at home? I would say 37 is very unlikely if Arsenal lose to Man City in the Cup. But 29 is very feasible, I think, like Leeds and Everton, quite possibly, even if Arsenal go out of the Cup. Marcus Rashford, people thinking about it now. He's obviously in hot form. City at home and Crystal Palace away, Suj. I think United will beat City at the weekend. I've said this a few times this week. So why not consider Rashford as a differential triple captaincy right now?
I've seen a few with it.
Yep. What I would say is we've obviously spoke quite a lot on this podcast about the possibility for an additional fixture in 22. Now, if the 22 fixture happens, it's Palace at home and Leeds or Brentford at home. And the streak he's on in home games would make that very appealing. I think if he continues his form and that lands that way, that might be what I go for. So I wouldn't go for Rashford this week. At 22, I'd be potentially very interested. Obviously, United's fixture with Brentford could stay in game week 25 if they lose the Carabao Cup semi-final. And it's not to say the Leeds fixture, if they're all out the FA Cup, couldn't go into that midweek, potentially. So Brentford Leeds in 25 is a possibility. United go to Liverpool 26, so we'll skip that. There is a small game week 27 double game week possibility. That would mean they would have to lose to Barcelona in Europa League last 32, which is a possibility. It's more of a possibility than 26 because 26 would be really short notice. If 27 did happen, it also would be interesting. Southampton at home is the scheduled fixture, and then you'd have Leeds or Brentford at home on top of that. United go to Newcastle in 29, so it wouldn't be that one. 34 and 37 are interesting fixtures. Villa at home in 34. Bournemouth away in 37. And again, I think all of the rearranged second fixtures would be interesting. Leeds at home, Brentford at home, Brighton away, or Chelsea at home, the possibilities. Remember I said there's a fair chance that the Brighton fixture might get held back to 37. So the most likely double in 34 would probably be Villa at home and Chelsea at home. Could then be two away games to finish Bournemouth and Brighton in 37. I think we should have our eyes potentially on this Rashford 22. I think that's potentially quite interesting. And Kieran Trippier I looked at because we've been overlooking him for captaincy all season, despite the fact he's hoovering up, joint top for bonus. He's got double the bonus points of any defender in FPL other than William Saliba. Obviously, Newcastle restricted, but it's a bit clearer of what the possibilities are. So should they reach the Carabao Cup final, remember they're out of the FA Cup, you could have United and Brighton both at home in 29. Perhaps more interesting, game week 34, Newcastle were scheduled to have Southampton at home. Now, you could have the Brighton game get rearranged into there, or if Tottenham made the FA Cup semi-finals, you could have Tottenham at home instead. In any case, it's two home games. And also for game week 37, if it happened right at the end, you've got Leicester at home and then Brighton or Tottenham at home. Newcastle obviously do have the West Ham fixture to be arranged as well. I do have a suspicion on West Ham against Newcastle and Leeds and Nottingham Forest, those two particular fixtures maybe being before the March internationals. It's a knock-on effect of the teams involved in that, i.e. Leeds and West Ham playing like Man City and stuff. There's a knock-on effect where it chains, where I think those two fixtures may get brought forward earlier than the big doubles. It's something possibly to be aware of. So, for example, do I think it's impossible that Kieran Trippier has double game week in game week 27 of Wolves at home and West Ham away, or Wolves at home and Brighton at home? Yeah, I also think that's a possibility. But I wouldn't say they stand out enough to make me think I'd triple captain Trips. So I think the best triple captaincy options in summary would be Haaland's never looks brilliant, in my opinion. It never looks like a brilliant double game week. Probably on paper, the very best possibility would be Fulham and West Ham in 34. I think Mo has a couple of interesting ones if it's really late in the season. I think Harry Kane, best possibility is game week 29. Arsenal could land as differential options later in the season because all their possible rearranged games are home games. Could be interesting. Rashford 22 would look really good, and there's another couple of possibilities maybe. And it may be later in the season it's Wout Weghorst or Bruno Fernandes, for example. And Trips is likely to have a double game week somewhere that involves 2 home games. And they are very strong at home. And obviously they don't concede many. But there isn't anything from the triple captaincy perspective that can happen that's going to look like Mo Salah 26 last year of like Leeds and Norwich at home. It's not going to be that blindingly obvious, which I think's nice. It means we'll get variation. I would rather than, I think 20 and 23 is close enough for Haaland that I'd rather wait for the second one and have more information on potential for others. That's my take. But there'll be a lot. If it basically, unless you're triple captain Erling Haaland this week, you'll probably want him to blank. It'll be over 200% EO. And similarly, if Marcus Rashford will be over 100 as well.
I suppose nothing's convinced me to use it this week on Haaland, so I'm going to let it go.
I don't even know what I'm doing for transfers, never mind if I'm sticking chips on or anything like that, to be totally honest. That's a wrap, I think. As said, we'll cover this in more detail again after the FA Cup 4th round, and things will be even clearer then.
Which is just after the end of January, so before the beginning of...
The 4th round is in between 21 and
30 or something like that.
And 22, yeah.
So, yeah, end of the month, which is like 3 weeks away. But no one needs to panic about anything other than if you want to use your triple captain and you feel like you want to go bold, just press the button, innit?
If you want to do it, go for it in terms of triple captaincy. I think probably the immediate one for people to be aware of is to go back what I said near the start, that the 3 fixtures that we think could be added in the next couple of weeks are the 2 Manchester United possibilities against Leeds and Brentford, and possibly Chelsea against Liverpool as well. I think that Carabao Cup semi-final really might have helped the possibility of bringing that Brentford fixture forward. I don't think the police are going to want the Leeds game twice over, but it might be something the Premier League deems as something that has to happen. But if the police go and we're not doing it, then you haven't got a football match. It's worth saying that.
Fair play. I mean, that's a very comprehensive rundown, James, of what is about to happen. Obviously interested in your thoughts, listeners. You can always head over to twitter.com/Planet FPL pod and jump in the comments for this podcast, or if you are on the YouTube.
What Suj wants to say is he's going to say, if you want to see all this mapped out on a piece of paper, sign up the fucking Patreon.
Reminder of the accounts that James shouted out earlier was obviously Ben Krellin, if you don't follow him, Legomane_FPL, if you don't follow them, Planet Sky, if you don't follow Ian, Planet Sky as opposed to Planet.
Yeah, it's with an, sorry, I should have said with an I rather than a.
Planet Sky. And Tala Nadeem, TALHA_Nadeem_90.
All really good people. They'll help as well. Ben, even though he's got on 250,000 followers on Twitter or whatever, he'll respond as long as it's a sensible question. He'll have a conversation with anyone and stuff. He's not ignorant or anything like that. And the other guys are all really underfollowed and should have a lot more followers.
Indeed. So there you go. Hopefully that's been useful. Do share the podcast if you. Well, actually, maybe not with your mini league rivals because you want to pip them.
One more, actually, if you want further listening, listen to The Wire today.
The crime show, see? Isn't that a box set?
The FPL Wire.
The FPL Wire on YouTube.
With our friends.
Backer and co. Zoff.
And Big Man Backer. Listen to them today, and why that's particularly important. Because James, you didn't cover Man City much in terms of who's going to play in a double and who's not. I didn't do that because Luke will do it on that show, and he'll do it much better than I can. Luke Disable he's a genius in terms of how he works out who Pep may and may not pick. I highly recommend listening to that podcast if you want further on Man City assets. And if you want my opinion, ask James Stream planned for 9:30 in the morning. You can ask me anything you like, including Man City assets. Lovely jubbly. That's tomorrow being Friday, 9:30 in the morning, over on youtube.com/Planet FPL. Other than that, you know what everyone's going to do, James. Rewind, get your pen and paper out and listen to it all again. Stay safe. Ciao for now. Thanks, everyone. Very importantly, play it your way. Be nice to each other. Good luck. Cue music, please, man child.